Today on Dictator Focus, we will be diving into the interesting and fascinating life of the dictator of Chile, Pinochet.
I've been a historian for years, and I've never been more intrigued by a leader like I am intrigued by Pinochet. He was just a unique man who used his power to do so much.
I studied history at Harvard, and I have spent hours and hours trying to find one focal point of the history of Chile, and that focal point just happened to be dictator Pinochet.
It all started in 1925, after the Constitution was written. It increased the role of leaders, causing an inflation of dictators. Ibanez seized and manipulated his power in 1927, and in 1952 he promised his people that he would strengthen law and order.
Later on, in 1964, Montalva introduced cautious social reforms. He failed to curb inflation, and Allende, another leader, took over in 1970. Under Allende's leadership, radical social reform was enacted.
While Montalva was in office, left-sided violence increased more and more each and every day.
It was Allende who attempted to enact Marxism. The typically democratic Chile worsened under his leadership and was shockingly backed by the leftists of the country.
It was crazy. The left Allende supporters seized properties, set up independent zones in cities and countryside, which was contrary to the president's own plans. They completely took his policies and warped them to fit their own ideas completely.
People failed to control the extremists of their party, and they eventually destroyed the Chilean economy.
It was awful. People fractured the society, politicized the education and military systems. For lack of better words, they completely bulldozed Chilean traditions and the Constitution.
With all of the changes from leader to leader, the failure of social reforms, and the worsening of inflation,
They were inches away from a civil war, and Chile almost craved a leader. And that's exactly what Pinochet was for them.
He came in with force, leading the military coup that overthrew Allende in 1973. Once the leader was out of the way, that's when he started. That's when he began to establish his brutal dictatorship. In 1972 and 73, he began to impose curfew. This is when inflation begins. Shortages become more pronounced, violence increases, especially in the chaotic countryside where MIR was seizing land. There was the emergence of facos, campamentos, and cordones, where police did not go and investment fell.
In 1973, he also changed contingency plans to a more overt and aggressive strategy. Navy and Air Force heads began coup planning. And he had been the leader of the Chile's military government from 74 to 90, and it was during his time in leadership when tens of thousands of the opponents of his regime were tortured.
In 77, consolidation of a personalistic military rule under Pinochet began. It was 78 when Pinochet orchestrated a referendum against the United Nations, and 75% of Chile supported him.
Propaganda was a large aspect of Pinochet's leadership. Chile's El Mercurio newspaper was the media wing of Pinochet's dictatorship and continues to influence the people and the national policies. The newspaper was fundamental to the dissemination of state propaganda, helping the authorities cover up the disappearances, summary executions, and repressive measures being carried out all over Chile.
This is actually comparable to Stalin, Russia's dictator from the 1900s. He had his own newspaper, the Pravda, that would discredit any other leaders or belief and would worship the things that Stalin did. Even Mao had propaganda with a book called The Little Red Book, a pamphlet that enforced his ideologies.
Stalin and Pinochet also had commonality when it came to their use of force. When Pinochet tortured people against his regime, Stalin was also known for torturing and killing people. He was a bit more aggressive, as he took out 1/3 of his own party. Mao, the dictator from China, can also relate to this idea, as he executed 700,000 of the people from the GMD.
Similarly to the rise of Pinochet, which followed the death of Allende, Stalin's power grew immensely after the death of his previous leader, Lenin.
There are also similarities in this regard to the Chinese dictator Mao. Chile was inches away from a civil war when Pinochet came to leadership, whereas an actual civil war broke out in China.
Mao, Stalin, and Pinochet all had things in common when it came to certain things, but it was the aims of their power that was so impactful.
Saluda su pueblo tan querido, fue un estadista, un gran libertador, fue presidente de nuestra gran nación, mi general Augusto Pinochet. Está su imagen en cada unidad, con sus soldados marchan contentos, con gallardía, con gran lealtad, con sus soldados marchan contentos, con gallardía, con gran lealtad. Mi general Augusto Pinochet, usted es el nuevo padre de la paz.